Everyone stared when Ethan pulled into the luxury car show in a dusty, dented old sedan. The paint was chipped, the bumper hung a little loose, and the engine gave a tired rattle as he parked. Some of the other drivers laughed, shaking their heads. "Wrong address, old man," one of them joked, as others filmed him pulling up, hoping to get a viral clip. No one there knew who he really was, or what he was about to do. Ethan didn't say a word. He stepped out in a plain black t-shirt and worn jeans, completely unfazed by the sea of luxury sports cars and designer suits around him. He glanced at the crowd once, smiled politely, and kept walking. To them, he looked like someone lost, or maybe desperate for attention, but he knew something they didn't. This car, the one everyone laughed at, had taken him through years of struggle. From sleeping in the backseat to running late-night delivery jobs just to keep the engine running, it held more stories than any of their new rides ever would. What they couldn't see was what was waiting at the airstrip just beyond the event. Because while they were busy mocking his car, Ethan had a flight to catch. Not just any flight, his flight. As the crowd followed out of curiosity, they watched him stop beside something that made everyone fall silent. His car wasn't the punchline anymore. It was just the beginning of the story. Ethan paused at the edge of the runway, the old car still parked behind him, and the sun glinting off something massive just ahead. A sleek, jet-black private jet, engines silent but ready. The same people who had laughed earlier now followed at a distance, their conversations quieter, phones still recording, but hands a little shaky. It didn't make sense to them. How could someone who drove that broken-down car have access to something so elite? But what they didn't know was where Ethan had come from. Years ago, he was just another guy trying to make it through life, working 2 jobs, fixing cars in his uncle's garage by day and learning coding at night. There were no shortcuts, only sacrifice, patience, and a lot of failure. That beat-up car had been with him through it all. It had no Bluetooth, no air conditioning, and barely passed inspections some years. But it was his. Through trial and error, Ethan had built a tech startup from his garage, quietly, without attention or flashy posts. It grew slowly, then all at once. Investors noticed. Clients came in. One deal led to another, and suddenly he was playing in a league most people only read about. But none of that was obvious at first glance. Especially not when all people could see was an old car and worn-out shoes. As he walked toward the stairs of the jet, someone finally asked, "Is that really yours?" Ethan turned, smiled, and said, "You'll see soon enough." As Ethan stepped onto the stairs of the jet, the whispers behind him grew louder. Some still thought it was a prank. Others weren't so sure anymore. A few of the influencers who had mocked him earlier now scrambled to get closer, trying to piece the story together. "Who is this guy?" One of them muttered, scrolling through their phone to see if he was famous or rich enough to have slipped under their radar. But Ethan wasn't trending, yet. Inside the jet, everything was spotless. Minimalist, high-end, and unmistakably his. The pilot gave a nod. "We're ready when you are, Mr. Cole." That name sparked a memory for one of the bystanders. Coltech, the software company that just closed a multi-million-dollar government contract. No one had ever connected the name to this man in the old car. Until now. But back outside, one person wasn't smiling. His name was Bryce, a luxury car dealership owner who had once turned Ethan down for financing years ago. Back then, Bryce barely looked up from his phone when Ethan applied. "Not the right image for our brand," he'd said. And now, watching Ethan board his own jet, Bryce felt something bitter rising. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was angry. Angry that a guy with a clunker had outpaced him, had built something without help, and was now being recognized. As the engines fired up, Ethan looked out the window, locking eyes with Bryce. No words were spoken. But both of them knew this wasn't over yet. The jet hadn't taken off yet. Ethan stood in the cabin, staring at his phone as a new message lit up the screen. "They're trying to block the deal," it read. His jaw tightened. He already knew who they were. Bryce and a few other industry insiders had caught wind of Ethan's next move, a tech integration project that could cut dealership costs by half. It threatened their outdated business model, and now they were scrambling to stop it before the launch went public. Outside, Bryce was already making calls. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was desperate. He knew if Ethan's platform went live, it wouldn't just shift the power in the car industry. It would erase the need for middlemen like him. And he had too much pride, too much image to protect. His empire had been built on flash and perception, but Ethan? He built his in silence, in a rusted-out car that everyone ignored. Back in the cockpit, the pilot waited. "Still good to fly, sir." Ethan hesitated. He knew the board would be meeting soon, investors needing assurance that he could hold ground. But he also knew something else. This fight wasn't about tech anymore. It was about the idea that someone could start with nothing, be laughed at, and still rise. Ethan looked out the window again. More phones were pointed at him now. Cameras rolling, stories being written in real time. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was clear. "They're going public with your past." Ethan's heart sank as he read the second message. "They found the footage from your warehouse days." He hadn't thought about that place in years, the rundown corner of the city where he lived and worked before things took off. Back when he was hustling to make rent, hacking together software systems with borrowed hardware and second-hand parts. Back when a few poor choices nearly cost him everything. The footage they were talking about was from a night he'd worked straight through, unaware that security cameras had picked up a heated argument between him and a former partner who later tried to sue him. The case had been dropped. No wrongdoing was ever proven, but now Bryce and his circle were digging it up, planning to twist it just enough to cast doubt. Within minutes, headlines were already surfacing online. Who really is Ethan Cole? Tech genius or shady past? The words weren't truthful, but they were enough to rattle investors, enough to delay funding, enough to raise questions in a world that judged faster than it understood. Inside the jet, Ethan closed his eyes. The noise outside the window grew louder. Not engines, voices. A group was gathering. Some were curious. Others were recording. But one face stood out. A journalist. Not just any reporter, but the one who'd covered his rise, someone who once called him the face of quiet innovation. She was walking toward the stairs now, mic in hand, camera crew in tow. And she didn't look friendly. Ethan stepped off the jet just as the reporter reached the bottom of the stairs. The cameras were rolling, her voice sharp and direct. "Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say about the footage just released? Is it true you threatened your former partner during a business dispute?" The crowd leaned in. Every phone was up. This moment could destroy everything he'd built. He didn't flinch. "Yes," he said calmly. "That footage is real. But so is the full story, and that part never aired." He pulled out his phone, tapped a file, and handed it to the reporter. "This is the full unedited footage. No threats, just frustration. A partnership gone wrong, and a lesson that made me who I am." The reporter hesitated, eyes scanning the screen. Her expression softened. "You knew this would come out one day." "I counted on it," Ethan said. "People deserve the truth, even when it's messy." The clip was streamed live within minutes. What had started as an attack flipped into a story of resilience. Investors began texting back. The board sent their approval. The funding went through. And Bryce? He watched it all unfold in silence as everything he tried to destroy only made Ethan stronger. But just as Ethan turned to board the jet again, a black car pulled up beside the runway. A man stepped out, older, with the same eyes as Ethan. No one knew who he was. Not even Ethan. But the man simply said, "We need to talk about your mother." Ethan froze at the bottom of the stairs, eyes locked on the stranger. For a moment, the crowd, the cameras, even the jet behind him seemed to fade. "What do you mean about my mother?" he asked cautiously. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to keep it private. "She didn't die in that accident. She disappeared, for your protection. I've been watching over you ever since." Ethan's world tilted. He had lived his whole life believing he was alone, raised by distant relatives, and working from scratch. Now, in the middle of his biggest moment, came a truth he wasn't ready for. But instead of breaking him, it grounded him. Everything he had built, his company, his journey, that old car, had never been about proving anything to others. It had always been about staying true to the parts of his past no one could take from him. The stranger handed Ethan a sealed envelope, nodded, and got back into the car. No more words. Just one final mystery to unfold in time. Ethan looked down at the envelope, then back at the jet waiting behind him. He smiled, not out of pride, but peace. As the engines rolled and the runway cleared, Ethan finally boarded, leaving behind the laughter, the headlines, and the doubt. His story of an old car, private jets, and unexpected truths wasn't just about success. It was about not letting where you start define where you finish. Because sometimes the rust hides the real gold. # old car transformation # from struggle to success # private jet story # unexpected twist # emotional journey # success against odds # inspiring story # from humble beginnings # YouTube short film # resilience story